What happens if the richest man in the world suddenly pays $100,000 for a drawing of an ordinary girl? The sound of the medical monitor echoed in the sterile silence of the room. Beep, beep, beep. Rhythmic, dispassionate, relentless. Jessica Collins sat on the edge of the hard hospital bed, swinging her feet in her battered blue sneakers. On one of them, she had drawn the constellation Orion, tiny silver dots in the blackness of space. The 12-year-old artist was always with her markers, turning any surface into a canvas. It was not by chance that she put on these sneakers today. They were her lucky charm. But it seems that luck decided to take a day off today. Lymphoma? Her mother's voice wavered, and Jessica felt her hand tighten around the child's. Are you sure? Dr. Reyes nodded, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses slightly. He had kind eyes, the kind of eyes that looked at you when they were about to tell you something scary, but were trying not to scare you. Unfortunately, yes. The biopsy results leave no doubt. Jessica has non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, an aggressive type. Jessica's mother, Elizabeth, sat next to her, her back straight, as if she'd swallowed a ruler. Jessica knew that look, the look her mother gave her when she was trying to be strong. It had been coming up more and more since her father had left 3 years ago. But it's curable. There was hope in my mother's voice, desperate and fragile. Jessica glanced down at her drawings, spread out on the nightstand. She'd brought them to pass the time while she waited. One of them showed a girl floating among the stars, bright colors spreading around her like a cosmic nebula. It seemed completely alien now, as if it had been drawn in another life, by another Jessica. Yes, Mrs. Collins, Dr. Reyes spoke slowly, choosing his words. At her age, the odds are good, but she'll need aggressive treatment. Chemotherapy, possibly radiation, and potentially an experimental immunotherapy protocol. Jessica knew what each of those words meant. She'd Googled them the day before, after overhearing her mom talking to a nurse. She knew that chemo meant her hair would fall out, that she'd feel weak and nauseous, that her skin would turn pale and there would be dark circles under her eyes, and that all this cost money, a lot of money. Dr. Reyes, Mom sat up even straighter, if that was even possible. Our insurance, will it cover the treatment? There it was, the question Jessica had been dreading to hear. She'd seen the bills on the kitchen table, caught her mom looking at job postings for second jobs when she thought Jessica was asleep. Dr. Reyes put the clipboard down on the table and took off his glasses. A bad sign. Adults always take off their glasses when they're about to say something unpleasant. The basic treatment is partially covered, but the experimental protocol, he paused, the insurance company considers it an unproven treatment for this type of lymphoma. And without it, I'm afraid your chances are significantly reduced. And how much will it cost? Mom's voice sounded as if she had aged 10 years in the last 5 minutes. A full course of treatment with an experimental protocol, the doctor exhaled. About $300,000. Jessica felt her mother's hand squeeze her fingers convulsively. 300,000. The numbers danced in Jessica's head. How many paintings would she have to sell to raise that much? 100? 1,000? 1,000,000? I understand. It's a huge amount, the doctor continued. There are aid funds, charitable programs. I'll give you the contact details of our financial consultant. She'll help. But Jessica wasn't listening anymore. She was looking at her drawings and thinking about her mom being an elementary school teacher, about how they were still paying off the mortgage on their small house, about how her mom had bought her last pair of shoes 2 years ago. $300,000. That's how much her life was worth. There was silence in the house. Not the cozy silence of Saturday mornings when he and his mother liked to drink cocoa with marshmallows and watch old cartoons. This was a heavy, oppressive silence that made him want to scream. Jessica sat on her bed surrounded by drawings. On the walls of her room hung reproductions of paintings by her favorite artists, Van Gogh, Dali, O'Keeffe, and between them, her own works. Bright, unusual, full of movement and life. Knock, knock. Mom looked into the room with a strained smile. May I? Jessica nodded, shifting. Mom sat on the edge of the bed carefully, as if she was afraid of disturbing something. How are you? She asked, although the answer was obvious. It's fine, Jessica lied. I'm just thinking. The mother looked at the drawing in her daughter's hands, a sketch of a spaceship flying past the red planet. Mars, Jessica's favorite planet since she learned about SpaceX's colonization project. It's beautiful. Mom traced the outline of the ship with her finger. You're amazingly talented. Jessica shrugged. What will happen now, Mom? Elizabeth Collins exhaled, her shoulders slumped, and for a moment Jessica saw what her mother had tried so hard to hide. Fear. Pure, unadulterated fear. We'll manage, honey. I'll talk to the bank about a loan. We can sell the car. It's old anyway. Her voice wavered, but she quickly pulled herself together. And Uncle Mike promised to help. Jessica knew that Uncle Mike, her mother's brother, was struggling to make ends meet raising 3 children. He wouldn't be much help. What about the house? Jessica asked quietly. The pause dragged on. We might have to sell it, Mom finally answered. But that's okay. We can rent an apartment closer to the hospital. It'll be even more convenient. But Jessica could see her mother's hands shaking. This house was all they had left after her father left. A small, cozy house with a tiny garden where her mother grew tomatoes and basil. With Jessica's room, where glow-in-the-dark stars were pasted to the ceiling, forming real constellations. When Mom left, Jessica went to the window. From the first floor, she could see the kitchen table, where Mom had laid out folders with documents and a calculator. Her shoulders were shaking, and Jessica realized that she was crying, quietly, silently, so that her daughter would not hear. Something broke inside Jessica at that moment. Something disappeared, perhaps the last vestiges of her childish innocence. And something new was born, a steely determination that burned like hot metal. I won't be a burden. Jessica stood in the middle of the kitchen, clutching a folder of drawings in her hands. It was late evening. The clock on the microwave showed almost midnight. Mom looked up, red-eyed, from her laptop where she was browsing job sites. What are you saying? Her voice was hoarse from fatigue. I know how much my treatment costs. Jessica stepped closer. And I know we don't have that kind of money. Oh God, Jessie, honey. No, listen. Jessica opened the folder and laid a dozen drawings on the table. I want to sell them. On the street. I'm good at it. Miss Carpenter always said I had talent. People buy paintings, don't they? Mom looked at the drawings. Bright, lively, unusual for a 12-year-old girl. Jessie, this is none of your concern, she said softly. You need to focus on healing, on getting better. How will I get better without money for treatment? Jessica's voice took on a steely edge that surprised even her. Mom, please. I can't just sit here and watch you sell everything we have. I want to help. I have to help. Elizabeth looked at her little daughter, who suddenly seemed so grown up. There was so much determination in her eyes, so much strength. Artists sell their paintings on the street, Jessica continued. I've seen them downtown. They have stands and people stopping by. I can do the same. Jessie, do you realize how many paintings you'll have to sell to raise a significant amount? How many hours do you have to work? Jessica countered. How much stuff do you have to sell? The house we live in? She paused. Please, Mom, let me try. Mom looked at the drawings for a long time, sorting through them with trembling fingers. One showed a colony on Mars, transparent domes among red sands, inside which green trees and sparkling water. Another, a spaceship flying past the rings of Saturn. The third, a portrait of Elizabeth herself, with such precision and love that it took your breath away. Okay, she finally said. We can try, on the weekend. But if you feel sick, we come home right away, okay? Jessica nodded, suddenly feeling tears streaming down her cheeks, the first since she heard the diagnosis. Thank you, she whispered, hugging her mother. That night, lying in bed, Jessica looked up at the stars on the ceiling. She thought about Mars, about spaceships, about a future that now seemed so distant and uncertain, and about tomorrow, when she would have her first chemotherapy. She was scared by the thought that her body would be filled with toxic substances that would kill not only sick cells, but healthy ones as well. Scared that her hair would fall out. Scared that she would feel bad. But what scared Jessica most was that she could cause the destruction of everything that her mother had worked so hard to build after her father left. She gritted her teeth and clenched her fists. No, she would not let the disease take away her future. She would not let fear win. She would fight, with a brush and paint. The only weapons she had. $300,000, she whispered into the darkness of the room. I'll collect that money, painting by painting, even if it takes me my whole life. Saturday morning greeted Austin with clear skies and a blazing sun. The thermometer read 92 degrees and it was only a little after 9. Jessica winced as her mother pulled their old Ford to the curb near the Congress Avenue Visitor Center. Are you sure you can handle it? Elizabeth turned to her daughter, adjusting her pale blue surgical mask. The heat is only going to get worse. Jessica nodded, clutching the folder of drawings. I'm fine, Mom. Really. She wasn't okay. Her body felt foreign after the previous day's chemotherapy, heavy like it was filled with lead. Her mouth tasted metallic, and her skin felt overly sensitive, like she had a sunburn. But Jessica hid her weakness behind a smile that her mother couldn't see through her mask. Dr. Reyes said only 2 hours, Elizabeth reminded him, unloading a folding table and chair from the trunk. No exceptions. I promise. Jessica carefully pulled out her work. 2 hours, no more. They sat in the shade of a large oak tree, close enough to the flow of tourists, but not so close that they were in the thick of the crowd. Jessica laid out her drawings carefully on a blue tablecloth her mother had brought from home. 25 works were the result of sleepless nights when pain and fear kept her awake, and drawing was the only way to stay sane. Space landscapes with red sands of Mars and transparent domes of colonies. Fantastic cities of the future, with flying cars and skyscrapers disappearing into the clouds. Abstract compositions full of movement and energy. And of course, portraits of Mom, the neighbor's cat, Nurse Nancy from the hospital. "How much do you think we should put up?" Jessica asked, setting up a homemade sign that read, "Selling art to beat cancer." Elizabeth thought, "Let's start with $30 for the small ones and $50 for the large ones." "I don't want to ask too much." Jessica nodded, even though a voice inside her screamed that at these prices they would need to sell thousands of drawings to raise the required amount. But they had to start somewhere. Done. Jessica sat down on a folding chair, trying to ignore the dizziness. Now we wait. The first hour passed in tense anticipation. People hurried about their business, rarely slowing their pace at the small stand. Some cast quick glances, others looked straight through Jessica, as if she did not exist. "Maybe we should move closer to the center of the street," Mom suggested, watching another group of tourists pass by. Jessica shook her head. "No, it's nice here. Someone will definitely stop." But no one stopped. Jessica caught snippets of conversation as people passed by. About restaurants, about the weather, about the music festival that was about to start. The usual everyday concerns. No one talked about life and death, about insurance and medical bills. They have it easy, Jessica thought, watching the laughing couple holding hands. They don't know what it's like to be afraid of the future. Finally, someone slowed down. A tall woman in an elegant pantsuit hunched her shoulders and leaned toward the stand, examining Jessica's work. She had short gray hair and bright red lipstick on her thin lips. "Did you draw this yourself?" she asked, holding up a drawing of Mars with a colony. Jessica nodded, suddenly feeling her heart pounding with excitement. "Impressive." The woman ran her finger along the lines of the dome. "How old are you?" 12, Jessica answered, trying to sound confident. The woman raised her eyebrows in surprise. "When I was your age, I could barely draw a stick with a circle for a head," she smiled. "And now I teach art history at the University of Texas? Funny how things work out, huh?" Jessica smiled too, although it was hidden by the mask. "I like this one." The woman pointed to the drawing. "How much do you want for it?" $50, Jessica said hesitantly, afraid the price would scare off the customer. But the woman, without hesitation, took her wallet out of her purse and handed over a banknote. "It's worth a lot more, honey, but I understand that you have to start small." When the woman left with the neatly wrapped drawing, Jessica couldn't believe her luck. First sale! $50 is a tiny step toward a huge goal, but still a step. "See?" Mom gently squeezed her shoulder. "I told you that someone would appreciate your talent." The second sale happened half an hour later. A young man in jeans and a t-shirt with the logo of a local brewery bought an abstract composition for his girlfriend. The third was an elderly couple who chose a portrait of a cat for their granddaughter. By the end of 2 hours, Jessica had sold 4 drawings, earning $120. It was more than she had expected, but still a pittance compared to the amount she needed. "Time's up," Mom said, glancing at her watch. "Time to go home, Jess." Jessica nodded, feeling the fatigue wash over her in waves. Her head was spinning, and her skin was covered in sweat despite the shade of the oak tree. The chemotherapy was making itself felt. "It's been a good first day," her mother encouraged her, gathering up the unsold drawings. "We'll try again tomorrow if you feel okay." But the next day, Jessica couldn't get out of bed. The nausea was so intense that every movement was torture. She lay curled up in a ball while her mother held a cool towel to her forehead. "It's okay, dear," Mom whispered. "Rest today. The street won't go anywhere." It was 3 days before Jessica was able to return to Congress Avenue. This time, she wore a baseball cap to hide the fact that her hair was falling out, in thin strands on her pillow, in the shower, under her brush. It was just a few stray hairs for now, but Jessica knew it would get worse. Wednesday was not as successful as Saturday. There were fewer tourists, most passersby were hurrying about their business. Jessica sold only 1 drawing to an elderly man who looked at her work for a long time and then silently handed over $100, although the price was marked as $40. "No change," he said quietly. "My grandson is sick too. A different form of cancer, but..." He didn't finish the sentence, just nodded briefly and left with the drawing under his arm. Thursday was even worse. No one stopped. No one bought a single work. Jessica sat with her hands clasped in her lap and watched the city go about its life. Noisy, bright, indifferent. By the middle of the second hour, a young guy with tattoos on his arms and a piercing in his eyebrow approached her stand. He looked at the works for a long time without saying a word. "Do you like anything?" Jessica asked, hoping for a sale. The guy chuckled. "No one buys real art these days, babe. You should try selling prints or, I don't know, making TikTok avatars. That's where the real money is." Jessica felt the color rise to her face. "I don't want to make avatars. I want to draw what I feel." "And how is it? Does it work?" The guy glanced at the empty sidewalk around them. Jessica gritted her teeth. "I don't need your advice. I'm just trying to fight." The guy shrugged and walked away, leaving a bitter feeling behind. Jessica stared at her hands, fighting back tears. Maybe he was right. Maybe no one wanted her drawings. "Don't listen to him." Mom sat down next to her, hugging Jessica's shoulders. "Some people just don't understand art." But doubt had already penetrated Jessica's soul like a poisonous fog. By Saturday, her third day at the stand, Jessica was beginning to realize the hard truth. She was raising money too slowly. She had raised just over $300 that week, a pittance compared to the hundreds of thousands she needed. That day, Jessica took new works with her, the ones she had painted in the hospital during her procedures. Darker, more emotional, filled with fear and pain that she couldn't put into words. One of these drawings was a self-portrait of a skinny girl in a hospital room, with an IV drip in her hand and stars in her eyes. Constellations swirled around her, as if she were the center of her own universe, despite her illness. Jessica laid out the new works next to the old ones and sat down to wait. It was going to be a hot day. Even in the shade, the thermometer showed 95 degrees. Sweat trickled down Jessica's neck, pooling under the collar of her t-shirt. Her mask made breathing difficult, and her baseball cap pressed on her temples. 2 more hours, she reminded herself. Just 2 hours. The first hour passed in the usual emptiness. People passed by, absorbed in their own concerns. Some cast fleeting glances at the fragile figure with the drawings, but no one stopped. And then there she was, a young woman with a camera around her neck and a notepad in her hand. She had dark hair pulled back into a loose ponytail and bright brown eyes that were scanning everything around her. "Wow," she stopped at Jessica's stand, looking at the drawings with genuine interest. "This is amazing." Jessica looked up, unsure if the woman was talking to her. "Did you draw all this yourself?" the stranger asked, picking up the self-portrait. Jessica nodded, suddenly embarrassed. "My name is Carla Rodriguez." The woman extended her hand. "I write for the Austin Creative Blog. We feature local artists and creative projects." Jessica," the girl answered quietly, carefully shaking the outstretched hand. Carla squatted down next to the stand, carefully studying the works. "Your technique is simply incredible for your age. How old are you?" 12. 12! Carla shook her head. "Unbelievable. Why do you sell your work here, and not in a gallery or online?" Jessica glanced at her mother, who was standing nearby, watching the conversation closely. Elizabeth nodded slightly, and Jessica decided, "I'm raising money for treatment. I have lymphoma, and—" She didn't finish, but Carla understood. Her eyes widened and then filled with softness and compassion. "Can I take a picture of your work?" she asked. "And you, for an article. I want to tell your story." Jessica looked uncertainly at her mother, who came closer. "Are you really going to write about her?" Carla nodded. "Absolutely. Her talent deserves attention, and perhaps the publication will attract more buyers. More customers, more money for treatment." Mom and Jessica exchanged glances. "Okay," Jessica agreed. Carla spent the next half hour photographing the drawings, taking notes, and asking questions. How long had Jessica been drawing? Who were her favorite artists? When was she diagnosed? How much did the treatment cost? $300,000, Jessica answered the last question quietly. Carla froze, her hand with a pen hovering over the notebook. "It's a huge amount." "Standard treatment is partially covered by insurance," Elizabeth explained. "But the experimental protocol that might actually help Jessie is considered unproven by insurance." Carla shook her head. "The healthcare system—" She didn't finish the sentence, but there was indignation in her eyes. "Can I ask a personal question? What happens if you don't raise enough money?" There was silence. Jessica looked at her drawings, not wanting to answer. "We'll sell the house," Elizabeth finally said. "We'll take out loans. We'll do everything we can." "And the impossible, too," Jessica added quietly. Carla nodded, closing her notebook. "I'll write about you, Jessica. But I can't promise that it will immediately attract buyers. Our blog is small." "Any help is important," Elizabeth smiled. "Thank you." When Carla left, Jessica felt strangely empty. She didn't believe that some article on an obscure blog would really change anything. But then, what else could they do? "How are you feeling?" asked the mother, noticing her daughter's paleness. "Maybe we should go home?" Jessica shook her head. There's still half an hour left. I'm fine. But she wasn't okay. Her head was spinning, and there was a metallic taste in her mouth that wouldn't go away. The chemotherapy was destroying her body from the inside out, and Jessica could feel it in every cell. The last half hour dragged on painfully. No one was buying any more drawings. The sun was mercilessly hot despite the shade. Jessica felt her strength leaving her with every passing minute. As they were finally about to leave, having sold only 2 pieces that day, a group of teenagers passed by their booth. One of them, a tall guy in a basketball jersey, slowed down, looking at Jessica. "Hey, are you bald?" he asked loudly enough for his friends to hear. Jessica froze, instinctively adjusting her baseball cap. A few strands of hair had escaped from underneath it, thin and brittle, like straws. "Come on, she has cancer or something," the guy's girlfriend snapped. "See the sign?" The guy shrugged. "I was just asking." They passed by, still chatting, but Jessica stood there, thunderstruck. It was the first time someone outside of her had spoken so openly about her illness. Not about her drawings, not about her talent, but about the fact that she was sick, about the fact that she was different. "Don't pay attention," Mom hugged her shoulders. "They're just stupid kids." But Jessica wasn't listening anymore. She looked at her drawings, at the meager sum she'd earned that day, and for the first time since her diagnosis, she felt hope slipping through her fingers. "Let's go home," she said quietly. At home, Jessica locked herself in the bathroom and took off her baseball cap. A pale girl with sunken eyes and thin strands of hair sticking out in different directions looked back at her from the mirror. She ran her hand over her head, and a few more hairs remained between her fingers. Jessica opened the cabinet and took out the scissors. If they're going to fall out anyway, she thought, why wait? 20 minutes later, she came out of the bathroom with her head cut short. Not completely bald, but very short, almost like a boy's. Mom gasped when she saw her, but immediately pulled herself together. "Let me help you trim it," she said, picking up the scissors. "It's not very straight at the back." That night, Jessica couldn't sleep. She sat by the window looking out at the stars and thought about Carla Rodriguez and her promise to write an article. She thought about the people passing by her stand, the few customers and the indifferent looks. About $300,000, which seemed such an impossible sum. She woke up this morning with a determination she hadn't expected from herself. If the world didn't care about her, she would make the world pay attention. If people weren't moved by her drawings, she would touch them with something else. Jessica took a new sheet of paper and began to draw. Not cosmic landscapes, not abstract compositions. Herself, the real her, with short hair and tired eyes, with an IV in her hand and stars above her head, with a price tag hanging around her neck that said $300,000. She painted all day, ignoring her headache and nausea. By evening, she had 3 new works, 3 self-portraits, each more revealing, more poignant than the last. "That's powerful," Mom said when Jessica showed her the drawings. "Are you sure you want to display them?" Jessica nodded. "People need to see the truth. They need to know what it's like to fight not only against a disease, but also against a system that values your life and money." On Monday, they headed out to Congress Avenue again. This time, Jessica didn't wear a baseball cap or try to hide her short hair. She wanted people to see her, the real her, without embellishments, without trying to look normal. She displayed the new drawings prominently, with the self-portraits in the center. To a sign that read, "Selling paintings to beat cancer," she added, "My life is worth $300,000. How much can you give?" And then something amazing happened. People started stopping, not just passing by, casting fleeting glances, but actually stopping, looking, reading. A middle-aged woman in an impeccable business suit stood frozen in front of a self-portrait, studying it with an inscrutable expression on her face. "Did you draw this yourself?" she asked, and Jessica detected something like respect in her voice. "Yes," Jessica answered, trying to sound confident. The woman nodded silently, then took out her wallet. "How many?" $100, Jessica replied, deciding to raise the price for these special works. The woman handed over the bill without hesitation. "I'll hang this in my office. I work for an insurance company." She smiled bitterly. "Maybe it will remind me and my colleagues that there are real people behind every refusal." By mid-afternoon, Jessica had sold all 3 self-portraits. People stopped, talked to her, asked questions. Some simply donated money without buying the drawings. One girl, with tears in her eyes, put $20 on the table. "This is all I have now. My mother died of cancer a year ago. Don't give up." By the end of 2 hours, Jessica had earned more than $400, a record for the entire existence of the stand. But most importantly, she no longer felt invisible. People saw her pain, her strength, her determination. As they were about to leave, a man in an expensive suit approached the stand. He looked at the remaining drawings for a long time, especially lingering on the image of the Martian colony. "You have a fine talent, young lady," he said with a slight accent. "May I purchase this?" "Sure," Jessica replied. $50. The man took out his wallet, but instead of taking out a bill, he handed Jessica a business card. "My name is Alejandro Martinez. I own the Nuevo Arte Gallery in the city center. I would like to exhibit your works, not for sale, for a charity auction. All proceeds will go to your treatment." Jessica stared at the business card in shock. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely," Martinez smiled. "Cancer runs in my family. I know what it means to fight. And I see a fighter in you, miss." "Jessica," she breathed. "Jessica Collins." "Miss Collins," he bowed slightly. "Think about my offer. Call me or come to the gallery with your mother. We can arrange something truly special." When he left, Jessica and Elizabeth looked at each other in silence, not believing their good fortune. "Do you understand what happened?" Mom whispered. "A real gallery. An auction." Jessica nodded, too stunned to speak. Something was changing. The world that had seemed indifferent yesterday was suddenly turning to face her. At home, another surprise awaited them. Mom turned on the computer to check her email and found dozens of messages from strangers who had read Carla Rodriguez's article on the Austin Creative blog. "I admire your story and your daughter's talent. Can I buy one of her works? I want to support Jessica in her fight. How can I transfer money? I would like to commission a portrait of my daughter, who is also battling cancer. Is this possible?" Message after message, offer after offer. People they had never met, people from all over Austin, offering help, support, money. "Mom," Jessica whispered, not believing her eyes. This works. People really want to help." Elizabeth hugged her daughter silently, unable to hold back her tears. At that moment, Jessica's phone vibrated. A notification from the news app. With trembling fingers, she opened the message and froze when she saw the headline. "Young artist challenges the healthcare system. Jessica Collins' story conquers social media." Carla's article was picked up by a major city portal, gained thousands of views and hundreds of reposts in a few hours. Photos of her self-portraits, her short-cropped head, her stand with a sign spread across the network like wildfire. Jessica sat frozen in front of the screen, unable to believe what was happening. She was no longer an invisible girl on the street corner. All of Austin was now looking at her, and this was just the beginning. Wednesday morning began for Jessica with a text from gallery owner Alejandro Martinez. "The press can't stop. Already 12 calls from collectors. Come today. A.M. Jessica rubbed her eyes, not quite believing what had happened in the last 2 days. Something had changed since Carla Rodriguez's article had been published, like a dam had burst, and a flood of attention had poured into her and her mother's quiet life. The local news picked up the story. 12-year-old artist paints to survive. Jessica has already given 2 phone interviews, and today she and her mother were invited to appear on the local TV station's morning show, but they declined. The day of chemotherapy is not the best time for TV cameras. "How are you, honey?" Elizabeth peered into the room, holding a tray with breakfast. After yesterday's procedure, Jessica felt her usual weakness. "It's okay," Jessica tried to smile, although her body felt heavy and foreign. "I think I can go to our place today." "Jess, I'm not sure. You look very pale," and Dr. Reyes advised. "Mom," Jessica interrupted her gently but firmly. "For the first time, people have noticed us. My story, my drawings, they're changing something. I can't stop now." Elizabeth sighed, knowing it was useless to argue. Her daughter had always been stubborn, and illness seemed to have only hardened the devil. "Okay," she conceded, "but only for an hour, and we'll take a folding chair instead of a stool so you can lean back." Jessica nodded, taking a small sip of tea. Even this simple act took effort. Her hands were shaking, and her throat was tight with nausea. But she wasn't going to give in, not when she had the chance. While her mother packed, Jessica checked for new messages. Their inbox and social media accounts were overflowing with offers of help, words of encouragement, and requests to buy paintings. "Mom, look," she exclaimed, scrolling through her messages. "This man from California wants to buy my self-portrait for $500. "That's wonderful, dear," Elizabeth smiled, though her eyes were worried. "But let's not get our hopes up. Social media interest is often fleeting." But Jessica didn't listen to the warnings. For the first time since her diagnosis, she felt something other than fear and despair. She felt excitement, anticipation. Maybe her crazy idea of selling her drawings wasn't so hopeless after all. Congress Avenue greeted them with an unusual bustle. It was just after 11 o'clock, and the street was already filled with tourists and locals hurrying about their business. "Look, our spot is free." Elizabeth pointed to a familiar stretch of sidewalk under a spreading oak tree. They quickly set up a folding table and laid out the drawings, both new and those that had been on sale. Jessica had added a few special pieces today: the Life in Between series, small sketches of hospital life, IV drips, flickering monitors, sterile corridors, and lonely figures of patients waiting their turn. Minimalistic, almost monochrome, but poignantly accurate in conveying the sense of isolation that serious illness brings. "Are you sure you want to sell these?" Mom asked quietly, looking at a particularly emotional drawing of Jessica curled up in a hospital bed. "They're so personal." Jessica nodded. "That's why. People need to see the truth. Not just the beautiful space landscapes, but what the struggle actually looks like." She hadn't finished laying out the drawings when she noticed several passersby slowing their pace, recognizing her. One woman whispered something quietly to her companion, pointing at Jessica. "Are you that girl from the news?" asked an older man, stopping at the stand. "The artist who's battling cancer?" Jessica nodded awkwardly, not used to such attention. "Yes, it's me. My grandson showed me an article about you." The man smiled, wrinkles spreading across his tanned face. "You're very brave, you know." Before Jessica could answer, a young couple with a child stopped next to her. "Look, Mike, it's that girl," the woman exclaimed, tugging at her husband's sleeve. "I told you I saw her here last week." Soon a small crowd had gathered around the stand. People were looking at the drawings, asking questions, taking photos. Some bought the works, others simply left money in a small glass jar that Mom had brought for donations. "How much does this space landscape cost?" asked a woman in a business suit, pointing to an image of Mars with colony domes. $75, Jessica replied, deciding to raise her prices in response to the increased interest. The woman took out her wallet without hesitation. "I'll take it. My daughter loves everything related to space." By 11 o'clock, Jessica had sold more drawings than she had in all the previous days combined. The donation jar was filling up with bills, and the folding table was almost empty. "I need to sit down," Jessica said quietly to her mother, feeling the dizziness growing. Elizabeth immediately helped her into a folding chair and handed her a bottle of water. "Maybe we should go home. You look very pale." "Just a little more," Jessica said, taking a sip. "There are so many people right now." It was true. It seemed like every passerby was now stopping by their stand, drawn by the unusual crowd. Some were taking selfies with Jessica, some were just standing to the side and filming the event on their phones. "Jessica!" Carla Rodriguez pushed through the crowd, waving her notebook. "Jessica, I can't believe the response my article has received. Several major websites have republished it, and now—" She didn't finish, noticing the girl's pallor. "Are you okay?" "Just a little weak from the chemo," Jessica tried to smile. "No big deal." Carla frowned. "You're overexerting yourself. Maybe you should rest, and I'll talk to the people, explain the situation to them." Before Jessica could respond, there was a movement in the crowd. People parted to let someone pass. There were surprised exclamations, and the clicks of smartphone cameras became more frequent. "This is—" Carla began, but fell silent, her eyes wide open. Jessica turned her head, trying to see what was going on, and froze. A tall man in a simple black t-shirt and jeans was heading through the crowd toward her booth. He was easy to recognize. His sharp, devilish face, his piercing gaze, his distinctive, slightly awkward gait. Elon Musk himself was walking straight toward her. "It's impossible," Jessica's mother whispered, squeezing her hand tightly. But it was real. One of the most famous people on the planet stopped right in front of the 12-year-old artist's stand and looked at her work with interest. The crowd around them fell silent. It seemed as if everyone had frozen, afraid to frighten the moment. Even the always noisy Congress Avenue seemed to have gone silent. Watching this surreal scene, Jessica was speechless. She knew who Elon Musk was. Of course she did. SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, Mars. The names of his companies and projects read like a list from a science fiction novel. For Jessica, who had dreamed of space and imagined Martian colonies since she was a child, Musk was a modern-day wizard who made science fiction come true. And now he stood here, next to her modest stand, and carefully studied the drawing of Mars with transparent domes of colonies. "Did you draw this yourself?" he asked, not taking his eyes off the painting. His voice sounded unexpectedly casual, with a slight accent. "Yes," Jessica breathed out, not believing that this was actually happening. Musk nodded, as if confirming some thought of his. "The domes are irregular in shape." "What?" Jessica blinked, not understanding. "The domes," he pointed to the drawing. "The spherical shape is not optimal for Martian colonies. Too much stress at certain points in the structure. Jessica felt the color rise to her pale cheeks. Elon Musk was critiquing her drawing. The great visionary was pointing out the technical errors in her childhood fantasy about Mars. It's just an artistic vision, she suddenly entered into the argument. The domes look more beautiful than the geodesic polyhedrons. Musk raised his eyebrows, clearly surprised by the rebuff. Beauty versus functionality. The classic dilemma. He smiled slightly at the corner of his mouth. But in space, functionality often means survival. The crowd around them grew. People were filming the scene on their phones, whispering and pointing. Elizabeth stood nearby, clutching her daughter's hand tightly, as if afraid this was all a dream that could melt away at any second. I know, Jessica nodded, feeling strangely bold. But I think it's important for the first colonists to not only survive physically, but also to preserve their humanity. And beauty is part of what makes us human. Musk looked at her carefully, and Jessica felt as if she had been x-rayed. His gaze was sharp, assessing, but not cold. That's an interesting point of view, he finally said. I don't often meet people who are willing to argue with me about the design of Martian colonies. I don't often meet people who even talk about Martian colonies, Jessica retorted, and a surprised chuckle ran through the crowd. Musk laughed, briefly but sincerely. Touché, he looked back at the drawings. Do you have anything else with a space theme? Jessica nodded, and her mother helped her get out a folder of work they weren't selling. More complex, detailed images of space stations, spaceships, and alien landscapes. Musk studied each drawing carefully, occasionally asking questions or making comments. He talked about space technology with the girl as seriously as he might talk to an engineer from his company, and Jessica responded with all the passion she felt for the topic. You know a lot for your age, he finally said, putting down the last drawing. What do you want to be when you grow up? Jessica hesitated. Before her illness, the question had seemed so simple. A space architect, an engineer, maybe even an astronaut. But now, when the future was so uncertain, when every day was a struggle for the very right to have that future? Alive, she answered quietly. I want to be alive. Something in Musk's expression changed. It was as if for the first time he had truly noticed not just a talented girl drawing spaceships, but a child struggling with a serious illness. I heard about your situation, he said, his tone growing serious, about your insurance refusing to cover an experimental treatment. Jessica nodded, not trusting her voice. It's a familiar story, Musk continued. The healthcare system is designed to maximize profits, not outcomes. It's an algorithmic problem. Algorithmic? Jessica asked, not understanding what he was getting at. Yes, Musk nodded. If the target function of the system is profit, not the health of patients, then the system will optimize processes to achieve exactly that goal. The basic principle of machine learning only applied to bureaucracy. He was talking about systemic health problems in terms of computer algorithms, and somehow it made sense. Jessica felt her eyes welling up with tears, not from self-pity, but from the sudden understanding that her personal struggle was part of a much larger problem. I don't want to be a bug in their system, she said quietly. I just want to live. Musk looked at her for a long moment, as if making a decision. Then he looked at the drawing of Mars with the domes of the colonies. I like this one. How much does it cost? Jessica was confused. $100? Musk shook his head. No, that's too little for an original concept of a Martian colony, even with the wrong domes. He took out his phone and started typing. Art should be judged not only by the time spent, but also by the uniqueness of the vision. He finished typing and turned the screen towards Jessica. I'm transferring $100,000 to the account listed in the article about you, he said calmly, as if he were talking about buying coffee. For this drawing. There were gasps from the crowd. Some gasped, some applauded. Jessica stared at the screen, not believing her eyes. 6 zeros after the 1. A number that seemed unreal. But this, she couldn't find the words. This is too much. For you, maybe, Musk shrugged. For me, it's a sensible investment in the future. I collect visions of Mars. He smiled slightly. Especially ones created by people who might one day help make those visions a reality. Elizabeth finally found her voice. Mr. Musk, we can't accept that amount for one drawing. This is... Why not? He turned to her, genuinely puzzled. Market value is determined by supply and demand. I want this drawing, and I'm willing to pay that price. Isn't that what the market is all about? He spoke so simply and logically that it seemed absurd to object. How can you argue with a man who made online payments, electric cars, and private space travel a reality? Besides, Musk added, this isn't charity. I actually think you're talented. He nodded at the drawing. These domes may be the wrong shape from an engineering standpoint, but they're inspiring. And inspiration is what drives innovation. Jessica looked at him wide-eyed, unsure of what to say. $100,000, a third of the amount needed for her treatment, for one drawing. Thank you, she finally managed, feeling a lump in her throat. I don't know what else to say. Thank you is enough, Musk nodded. And by the way, if you're interested in seeing what the first Martian settlements will actually look like, come to SpaceX. We have some interesting prototypes. He said it so casually as if he were inviting the neighbor's kid to come look at a new toy. Jessica could only nod, still not believing what was happening. One more thing, Musk said, pulling a business card out of his pocket and handing it to Elizabeth. Call this guy. He works at a medical research center in Houston. They're running a clinical trial for a new treatment for lymphoma. Tell him I referred you. They'll find a way to get Jessica into the program. Elizabeth accepted the business card with trembling hands. I don't know how to thank you. No thanks, Musk shrugged. Our healthcare system is condemning people to death because of bureaucracy and greed. It's inefficient and immoral. I'm just correcting a bug in the system. He turned back to Jessica. Keep drawing, and don't let anyone tell you that domes have to be geodesic polyhedrons. He winked slightly. Sometimes beauty is more important than functionality. With that, he took the drawing of Mars, carefully folded it, and put it in the inside pocket of his jacket. Then he looked at the assembled crowd, frowned slightly as if he had just realized how many people were watching them, and without further ado, he strode away. The crowd parted for him. People took out their phones, filming, taking pictures, passing on to each other the news of what had just happened. Did you see? It was Musk. He just bought this girl's drawing for $100,000. She's fighting cancer. I read about her yesterday. Did anyone film this? Post it quickly. Jessica sat there stunned, watching Musk's retreating figure. Suddenly her knees buckled and she swayed, nearly falling out of her chair. Jessie! Mom rushed to her, supporting her. Are you feeling unwell? I just can't believe it, Jessica whispered. Did that really happen? Did he really? Yes, honey. Elizabeth hugged her daughter tightly, not hiding her tears. It really happened. Carla Rodriguez scribbled frantically in her notebook, raising her head every now and then to make sure she was not asleep. This is the most incredible thing I've ever seen, she breathed. Elon Musk just walked by and stopped at your booth? I guess so. Jessica still couldn't comprehend what had happened. Unless this is some kind of crazy dream. Not a dream. Carla showed the screen of her phone, where the first video of the meeting had already appeared, uploaded by one of the viewers. Already over 1,000 views in 5 minutes. By evening, the whole world will know about Jessica Collins and her Martian domes. The crowd around the stand did not thin out. People came up, congratulated, asked questions. Some handed over money, asking nothing in return. Others wanted to buy drawings, any that were left. I'll give you $200 for that one. The tall man in the suit pointed to a small sketch of a space station. $300 for a self-portrait, interrupted the woman in the bright dress. $500 for the entire Life in Between series, someone from the crowd shouted. It was like an auction. Prices were skyrocketing. People were outbidding each other. Everyone wanted to get the drawing of that very girl whose talent Elon Musk himself recognized. Jessie, Mom leaned over to her, looking worriedly at her pale face. We have to go home. You look really exhausted. Just a little longer, Jessica said, watching her latest work go by. This is our chance, Mom. It may never happen again. Your health is more important, Elizabeth was adamant. Besides, we just got 100,000 reasons to be confident that we can handle this. Jessica nodded reluctantly, feeling the fatigue weighing heavily on her. The chemotherapy and emotional strain were taking their toll. Elizabeth began packing her things and Carla helped hold back the crowd, explaining that the girl needed to rest. Don't worry, the journalist told the people who still hoped to buy the drawings. Jessica will soon have an exhibition at the Nuevo Arte Gallery. Her works will be available for purchase there. When they finally got into the car, Jessica leaned back in the seat, closing her eyes. Her body ached with fatigue, but inside there was a warmth she hadn't felt since her diagnosis. Not just hope, but certainty. They really could do this. Did you see their faces? She whispered without opening her eyes. When Musk approached the stand, it was like a wizard appeared. For many, he is something of a wizard, Elizabeth smiled, starting the car. A man who turns science fiction into reality. And for me, he's just a person who believed in my drawings. Jessica opened her eyes and looked at her mother. And in me. Elizabeth reached out and squeezed her daughter's hand. I always believed in you, sunshine, and I always will. The drive back home was silent. Jessica looked out the window at the city rushing past and thought about the strange turns of fate. How one moment can change everything. How meeting someone you never expected to see can change your life. Her phone couldn't stop buzzing with messages and notifications. Videos of her meeting with Musk were spreading like wildfire. The hashtag Jessica's Mars was already trending on Twitter. People were sharing her story, her drawings, her struggle. When they pulled up to the house, a TV station car was already parked in the driveway, and a young reporter with a microphone was shifting from foot to foot on the porch. Jessica Collins, can I have a few words for tonight's edition? A young reporter with a perfectly coiffed hairdo and two white teeth rushed to the car as soon as Elizabeth turned off the engine. Behind him, a cameraman was already setting up the camera. Please, not now. Elizabeth stepped out of the car, shielding her daughter with her body. My daughter's very tired. She's undergoing chemotherapy. Just a minute. The reporter did not back down. The whole city is talking about Jessica's meeting with Elon Musk. It's a sensation. Jessica climbed out of the car slowly, leaning against the door. The chemotherapy was taking the last of her strength, but a new energy, the energy of hope, was keeping her going. Just one question, she said softly, looking at the reporter. Then I really need to rest. The reporter beamed, straightened his tie, and nodded to the cameraman. The camera's red light flashed, and the young man instantly transformed, as if someone had flicked an invisible switch. We are broadcasting live from Green Street, where Jessica Collins lives, a 12-year-old artist who just an hour ago became the center of an incredible story. Jessica, tell our viewers what it was like to sell your drawing to Elon Musk for $100,000. Jessica took a deep breath, collecting her thoughts. It doesn't seem real. Just this morning, I was just a girl trying to raise money for treatment, and now, she shook her head. Now the whole world has turned upside down. What did Elon Musk tell you? What did you talk about? About Mars, Jessica smiled weakly. About the colony domes I drew in irregular shapes, and about how sometimes beauty is more important than functionality. The reporter seized on this phrase. Beauty is more important than functionality. Are these Elon Musk's words? Yeah, something like that, Jessica nodded. He said I shouldn't let anyone tell me that domes have to be geodesic polyhedra. Amazing! The reporter was literally glowing with excitement. And this is a man who builds rockets and electric cars. And what about the money? $100,000 is a third of the amount needed for your treatment, right? Yeah. Jessica felt a sudden rush of fatigue. Look, One more question. The reporter leaned forward. What did you feel when you saw Elon Musk at your booth? Jessica thought for a second. I thought he looked like a normal person, not a billionaire or a celebrity, just someone who was interested in space and drawings of it. She ran a hand through her short cropped hair, and then I realized he was special, because he saw me, really saw me when most people were passing by. The reporter opened his mouth for another question, but Elizabeth firmly cut the interview short. That's all. My daughter needs rest. They walked into the house, leaving the journalist to finish his final sentences for the camera. Jessica sank down onto the sofa with relief, feeling the room sway slightly before her eyes. Let me help you get to bed. Mom stroked her cheek. You need to sleep. I want to check my phone first. Jessica took out her smartphone and gasped when she saw the number of notifications. Mom, there are hundreds of messages, and my Instagram account. She hesitated, looking at the numbers. I had 200 followers this morning. Now there are more than 50,000. Elizabeth sat down next to him, looking at the screen. This is some kind of madness. Jessica scrolled through her notifications, unable to comprehend the scale of what was happening. Look, people from other countries are writing here. France, Japan, Brazil. They've all seen the video with Musk. Her phone rang, displaying an unknown number. Jessica looked questioningly at her mother. Let me answer. Elizabeth took the phone. Hello? She listened for a few seconds, then her eyes widened. Yes, this is Jessica Collins' house. What? Liv. She covered the phone with her hand. CNN. They want you to do a live interview tonight. CNN? Jessica couldn't believe it. Like national news? Elizabeth nodded, returning to the conversation. To be honest, my daughter is very tired. She is undergoing chemotherapy, and today has been extremely busy. Maybe tomorrow? She listened to the answer, then promised to call back and hung up. They're offering to send a mobile studio to our house, she explained to Jessica, so you don't have to go anywhere. But I think you really should rest today. Mom, this is CNN. Jessica leaned forward despite her fatigue. Millions of people are going to be watching. Can you imagine how many donations that could bring in? How many people would learn about the problems with access to experimental treatments? Elizabeth hesitated. I'm just afraid you'll overexert yourself. The doctors talked about the risk of infections. If they come here, the risk is minimal, Jessica said stubbornly. Please, Mom, this is our chance. Not just for me, but for other children in the same situation. Elizabeth sighed in defeat. Okay, but only half an hour, no more. And first you should sleep for at least a couple of hours. As the day wore on, the phones in the Collins home continued to ring. Journalists, TV stations, gallery representatives, ordinary people offering help. The calls followed, one after another, giving no time for silence. But the real miracle happened when Elizabeth called the number on the business card Elon Musk gave them. After a short conversation, she walked into Jessica's room with such an expression on her face that the girl immediately realized that something important had happened. They're taking us, Elizabeth said quietly, sitting on the edge of the bed. A clinical trial at Houston Medical Center. Cutting-edge immunotherapy using engineered T-cells. The program director said he looked at your case and you're a perfect candidate. Really? Jessica sat up on the pillows, her eyes wide. And insurance? The research grant covers all expenses, Elizabeth swallowed, clearly holding back tears. He said Elon Musk personally recommended you for the program. Even the chief scientist couldn't say no to the guy who sends rockets into space. Jessica felt a lump rise in her throat. The irony of the situation suddenly hit her with renewed force. Months of fighting the insurance bureaucracy, endless forms, appeals, denials, and all of it had been overcome in one day with one call from someone with enough influence. It's not fair, she said quietly. It's not that I'm not grateful, but what about the other kids? The ones who don't have pictures of Martian colonies? The ones who haven't accidentally bumped into Elon Musk on the street? I know, honey, Elizabeth hugged her daughter. The system really is broken. But for now, let's be happy that you have a chance. And then, when you're better, we can fight to change it. Jessica nodded, allowing herself to put aside the unfairness of the world for a moment and just feel relief. She would have treatment. She would have a chance. The CNN crew arrived that evening, 3 men with compact equipment that quickly transformed the Collins living room into a makeshift TV studio. Jessica put on her favorite Galaxy t-shirt and hesitated for a few minutes before deciding to reveal her short hair. You look great, the makeup artist assured her, applying light makeup to hide her pallor. Very strong and determined. Live in 5 minutes, the director announced, looking at his watch. Jessica, you'll be speaking with Anderson Cooper from our studio in New York. The usual questions. Your story, meeting Musk, the audience's reaction. Just be yourself. Jessica nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She was an artist, not a speaker. What if she stumbled? What if she said the wrong thing? Everything will be fine. Mom squeezed her hand as if reading her thoughts. Just speak from the heart. And then the moment came. The host's voice came through her earpiece, and on the screen in front of Jessica, she saw the famous Anderson Cooper, who was smiling at her from a studio in New York. We have Jessica Collins with us today, he began, a 12-year-old artist from Austin whose story has shaken America. Jessica, good evening. Hello, Jessica tried to sound confident. Tell us how this amazing story began. I know you sold your drawings to raise money for treatment. Jessica took a deep breath and began to tell her story. About her diagnosis, about the cost of the experimental treatment, about her decision to use her talent to raise the money. The words flowed easily, as if she were telling a story about someone other than herself. And today, Elon Musk just walked past your stand? Anderson's voice was filled with genuine surprise. Yes, Jessica nodded. He stopped and looked at my drawings of Martian colonies, and we got to talking. At first, he criticized the shape of the domes. She couldn't help but smile. And then, for some reason, he decided that one of them was worth $100,000. It's unbelievable, Anderson shook his head. The video of the encounter has already been viewed over 15 million times on social media. Why do you think this story has touched people so much? Jessica thought, I think because we all need hope sometimes. Proof that miracles are possible. That even when it seems like the whole world is against you, something can happen that changes everything. You're very wise for your age, Anderson said. And what about the criticism? Some commentators are already saying that Elon Musk has used your story for self-promotion, while systemic health problems remain unsolved. Jessica tensed. She hadn't expected such a question. I don't think it was for publicity. He didn't even want us on camera. And as for the systemic problems, she paused, considering her answer. Yes, they exist. Just because I was lucky doesn't mean the system doesn't need to change. In fact, my story shows how broken it is. Why should a child's life depend on a chance encounter with a billionaire? It's not right. There was a moment of silence on the airwaves. Then Anderson nodded slowly. A very honest answer, Jessica. What next? I heard that you have already received an invitation to show your work in a gallery? Yes, and even more important news is that I've been included in a clinical trial of a new immunotherapy. Jessica beamed. This is the very treatment that the insurance company refused. And now, thanks to all this attention and support, I have a chance. That's wonderful, Anderson smiled. We'll all be following your story and wishing you a speedy recovery. Is there anything you'd like to say to everyone watching us now? Jessica turned directly to the camera. I want to say thank you to everyone who supported me, who bought my drawings, shared my story, sent messages. You proved that kindness and compassion still exist in this world. She paused. And I want to say a message to other children who are currently battling cancer or other serious illnesses. Don't give up. Use your voice, your talent, everything you have. Make the world hear you, because everyone deserves a chance at a future. Anderson Cooper's eyes visibly moistened. Thank you, Jessica. You are truly an extraordinary girl. When the broadcast ended, Jessica sat back in her chair, feeling both exhausted and strangely exhilarated. She had said what she really thought in front of millions of viewers. She had made her voice ring. You were amazing, Elizabeth hugged her daughter. So genuine, so strong. Jessica's phone exploded with another wave of notifications. She glanced at the screen and saw a message that made her heart jump. This tweet was followed by another message. Elon Musk. SpaceX is donating $1 million to a new fund called Art of Healing that will help young artists with serious illnesses. Jessica Collins is the first beneficiary. Mom, Jessica whispered, turning the screen toward her. Do you see this? Elizabeth read the messages and her hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. $1 million? A fund? Before they could process the magnitude of the news, the phone rang again. This time it was Alejandro Martinez, the gallery owner. Jessica! He sounded like he was on the verge of a heart attack from excitement. Have you seen the news? Musk is starting a foundation. It's blowing up the internet. Listen, I'm getting calls from collectors all over the world. Everyone wants your work. I can organize an exhibition tomorrow. And not just an exhibition, a real auction. Tomorrow? Jessica exchanged glances with her mother. But I don't have much work. It doesn't matter, Alejandro exclaimed. 10, 20 drawings. That's all you have. People are in such a rush right now that each one could go for thousands. Do you understand, Jessica? Thousands of dollars per drawing, and all the proceeds go to your foundation. Jessica didn't know what to say. Just yesterday, she was just a sick child desperately trying to raise money for treatment. Today, she was the center of a hurricane that captured the attention of the entire world. The next morning began with the doorbell ringing incessantly. Couriers were delivering packages. Flowers, gifts, letters from well-wishers all over the world. The phones continued to ring off the hook. This is crazy, Elizabeth muttered, accepting another bouquet. We don't even know these people. Jessica sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through a new wave of social media posts. Elon Musk's tweet had set off a chain reaction of philanthropy. Celebrities and ordinary people alike were donating, sharing the hashtag Jessica's Mars, calling for healthcare reform. Mom, look! Jessica pointed at the laptop screen. Samsung donated $500,000 to the Healing Arts Foundation, and Bill Gates donated $500,000 too. What? Elizabeth came over, looking over her daughter's shoulder. This is incredible. Jessica scrolled through her newsfeed, not believing her eyes. They write here that over the last 12 hours, more than $3 million have been received into the fund, and the amount continues to grow. $3 million. That's 10 times more than it took to treat her. Money that could have helped dozens, if not hundreds, of other children in her situation. I don't understand why me, Jessica said quietly. Why did my story touch people so much? There are thousands of kids in the world with the same problems. Sometimes it takes one story to make people see a problem, Elizabeth said, hugging her daughter. One face, one story that becomes a symbol. The phone rang again. This time it was Dr. Rivera at the Houston Medical Center, where Jessica was to undergo an experimental treatment. Mrs. Collins? Her voice was excited. I was calling to let you know that we are ready to accept Jessica today. After all the media attention her story has received, something amazing happened. Several families with children in similar situations contacted us and... She paused. Haiku, we decided to expand our program. Instead of 10 participants, there will now be 50. All children whose insurance companies refuse to cover the experimental treatment. Elizabeth pressed her hand to her heart. Are you serious? 50 children? Yes, Dr. Rivera confirmed. Jessica's story opened the floodgates. We received additional funding from private donors and foundations. Yesterday, our website almost crashed from the influx of visitors wanting to donate. When the conversation ended, Elizabeth turned to Jessica, tears in her eyes. Did you hear? 50 children will be treated because of what happened to you. Jessica felt something warm spread in her chest. Not pride, not vanity, but something deeper and purer. The realization that her little struggle had turned into something much greater. Mom, she looked at her watch. Isn't it time we went to the gallery? Alejandro said the auction starts at noon. Are you sure you can handle it? Elizabeth studied her daughter's face carefully. It will be tiring. Lots of people. Cameras. I have to be there, Jessica said firmly. This isn't just about me anymore. This is about all the kids who can be helped. The Nuevo Arte Gallery was housed in an elegant building in downtown Austin. The usually quiet, uncrowded space was buzzing like a beehive today. There was a line of people waiting to get in, and several TV crews were stationed on the sidewalk. Oh my God, Elizabeth breathed as their car pulled up to the gallery's back doors. This looks like a Hollywood premiere, not a drawing show. Alejandro Martinez greeted them personally, nervously adjusting his tie. Jessica, finally, it's crazy there. People have been queuing since 5 in the morning. He led them through the service entrance. The gallery's main room had been transformed, with Jessica's drawings taking center stage, neatly framed and backlit. Each work was accompanied by a plaque with its title and starting price. I arranged them thematically, Alejandro explained, leading them around the room. Here are cosmic landscapes, here are abstract compositions, and in the central section are your self-portraits and the hospital series, Life in Between. Jessica paused in front of one of her self-portraits, the one where she had depicted herself with a price tag around her neck that read $300,000. In such a professional frame, under the directed light, the drawing looked even more poignant and symbolic. The starting price on this one is $5,000, Alejandro said, but I expect it to go for at least 20. 5,000? Jessica shook her head. That's crazy. Just a week ago, I was happy to sell the drawing for $50. It's the art market, my dear, the gallerist smiled. Price is determined by demand, history, and symbolism. And your work has all of that in abundance right now. At noon, the gallery doors opened to the public. People streamed in, filling the space with the hum of voices and the clicking of cameras. Jessica stood in the corner, watching with a sense of surrealism. All these people had come to see her drawings, to be part of her story. Jessica, an elegant woman with a notepad, approached her. I'm from Women's Health magazine. Can I ask you a few questions about your experience with the healthcare system? Before Jessica could answer, a man with a microphone appeared next to her. BBC News, Jessica. Your story has taken the internet by storm in the UK. What do you think of the American health insurance system compared to universal healthcare? Elizabeth tried to protect her daughter from excessive attention. Please, give us one at a time. Jessica is still undergoing treatment and needs to conserve her strength. But the questions came from all sides. Reporters, collectors, the curious, all wanted a minute of Jessica's attention, a piece of her story. She answered as many as she could, until finally Alejandro took matters into his own hands. Ladies and gentlemen, he clapped his hands loudly. Shumaniornon. The auction is about to begin. Please take your seats. The bidding began. The first drawing, a small space landscape with a starting price of $1,000, went for $8,000 after a lively battle between a local businessman and an online bidder from Japan. The second drawing went for $11,000. The third for $15,000. Prices skyrocketed, and the faces of the bidders were ablaze with excitement and a desire to be part of something special. When the self-portrait with the price tag of $300,000 was put up for auction, a special silence fell over the room. This drawing became a symbol of the whole story, the quintessence of Jessica's struggle. The starting price of $5,000 was outbid in the first seconds. 10, 15, 20,000. The numbers grew with astonishing speed. When the amount reached 50,000, two participants remained, a representative of a large insurance company and an anonymous online buyer. At the mark of $130,000, the insurance company gave up, and the drawing went to a mysterious collector. Only when the bidding was over, Alejandro announced the name of the winner, the Smithsonian American Art Museum. Jessica's self-portrait with the price tag of her life will be exhibited in one of the most prestigious museums in the country as a symbol of the fight for affordable medicine for all. In that moment, Jessica realized that her small story had become something much bigger. She had become the voice of a generation, a symbol of hope, and a catalyst for change.